All right. Hello, everyone, for joining. Again, I appreciate very much for your support. Now, today we got our greatest honor to have Professor uh, Wei Yu from University of Toronto to give us an exciting talk about machine learning in communication, now, which is an emerging topic in communications as well as in signal processing. Now, speaking of emerging topics, I knew Wei for many years, and he has been and still is a leader in this field, whether you talk about signal processing, communication, or information theory. Now, I remember the older days, it would be about early 2000. At those times, we didn't have that much about what we call MIMO. Our communication system is remain pretty passive in terms of design. Now, for those who are newer generation in communication might not have that feeling, but look at the textbook. That's how it will be closer that way. The design is very passive. And by the time we start to look into design such as resource allocation, the more active approach, power allocation, as well as MIMO beamforming, why at that time has been among one of the leaders pushing these areas. He has been leading our fields from time to time, and the most recent of which will be today's talk, machine learning and communications, which I'm also excited to know about how it's going to look like. A very quick introduction about Wei. He got his bachelor degree from University of Waterloo, Canada, and then later on got his master and PhD degree from Stanford. Now, his interest is mostly in information theory, optimization, and wireless communications. Now, he's not only just a leader having significant contributions to information theory, communication, and signal processing. He also have extraordinary service, like most recently, he is vice president of IEEE Information Theory Society, which is from 2019 to 20. Also, he is the TPC, one of the co-chairs of TPC for ISID 2020. Also, in signal processing, he was SPCOM TC chair from 2017 to 80, and also served numerous editorial blogs. Either you talk about IEEE transaction on information theory, IEEE transaction on wireless communications, etc., etc., and etc. So as well, he also won numerous awards. In signal processing, he won 2 awards. Signal Processing Society Best Paper Award 2008 and 2017, which is an excellent record. Marconi Prize Award 2019, and also IEEE Communication Society Award for Advances in Communication in 2019. So, and obviously he's an IEEE fellow and also a member of Royal Society of Canada's College of New Scholars, Artists, and Scientists. Anyway, without further ado, the floor is yours, Wei.
All right, thank you, Ken, for such a generous introduction. Let me
Our
share my
pleasure.
screen.
Oh,
Let's see.
first of all, share my screen. Okay,
Okay.
yeah, great.
Okay. Good morning or good evening, everybody. The title of my talk is Machine Learning for Massive MIMO Communications. This is joint work with several of my students and postdocs for Shirabi, Karin Atea, and Victor Chen at the University of Toronto. So machine learning has made a tremendous progress in the past 10 years or so. Now it's universal across many different fields, in recommendation systems, in self-driving cars, in playing chess or playing games, so even solving physics problems, machine learning has taken by storm in many, many different areas. So why is machine learning so powerful? There are several reasons. One is that a deep neural network has been shown to be a universal function approximator, either by supervised learning or reinforcement learning. It can just approximate any input-output relationships if you have a network that's rich enough in the structure. More importantly, machine learning is able to solve poorly defined problems that does not necessarily have a well-defined mathematical structure. And it's doing so by incorporating a vast amount of data. And machine learning is really powerful, really, because one more reason, that is that there is nowadays highly parallelizable implementation structure able to process these data efficiently. So for these reasons, machine learning has has great potential, not only in the applications that you see today, but also in many of the future applications. So this is in contrast to classical mathematical programming approach to engineering. Mathematical optimization typically require a highly structured model over well-defined problems. We have linear programming problem over a polytope. We have a linear objective function, and we know how to solve that. And finding efficient solution rely on these specific and often convex optimization structure of the objective function and the constraint. So the traditional approach to engineering problems has always been to model the problem first, then to optimize. And what's new about machine learning is that machine learning approach allows us to be data-driven in the sense that we are now able to skip modeling step, skipping the modeling step altogether. So in this talk, I'm going to give two examples of wireless communication examples where we can take advantage of this ability to directly arrive at a solution without explicit mathematical model. So traditionally, communication engineering has invested heavily on channel models. But the problem with model is that its models are inherently only an approximation of reality. And moreover, model parameters need to be estimated, and there's inherent estimation error. What the machine learning allows us to do is to potentially skip the channel modeling step altogether to enable end-to-end communication design. And this is one of the themes that I'm going to talk about today. And the other aspect of the machine learning approach to communication is it allows us to implicitly account for channel uncertainty. And this is one big problem in communication system design that has now been solved to our satisfaction. So this talk will provide two examples in MIMO, a massive MIMO communication design for millimeter wave communications. So I'm going to divide this talk in two parts. One is looking at the frequency division duplex or FDD massive MIMO system.
Sorry to interrupt a little bit. Some of the audience asked whether well, including myself, we still only see the first page of the slides, or we wonder whether.
No, I've been flipping.
Yeah, so probably, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, would you mind if you can chat again?
Yeah, probably you want to first of all unshare the screen and actually use the share the whole desktop option, just like what we did yesterday.
I did. Oh, I see. Okay, let me see this.
Oh yeah, yeah, we see a different page now.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
Great.
This is page one, and let me recap briefly what we have done. So I was reviewing how why machine learning has been so powerful for several of these reasons. And this talk is about using machine learning techniques in contrast to the traditional approach of using this model first, then optimized approach. We're going to look at how we might be able to skip the channel modeling step altogether. Okay, so this talk will focus on two examples in massive MIMO communication design in the millimeter frequency range, and we're going to look at both the FDD massive MIMO system as well as the GDD MIMO system. In the FDD example, I'm going to look at the multi-user channel estimation and feedback problem, and in the FDD massive MIMO, I'm going to look at a symbol level precoding problem. Okay, so this is how this talk will be structured. Okay, so a little bit introduction on massive MIMO for millimeter wave communications. Massive MIMO is a technology that allows us to have hundreds of antennas deployed at the base station, serving many, many users at the same time. One of the key problems for massive MIMO communication is how to estimate the channel state information. Okay, so there are two different approaches to obtaining channel state information. One is to design the system as a time division duplex system. In this case, we assume channel reciprocity, and what we do is we do training in the uplink. So each user will send a pilot in the uplink, then the base station will estimate the channel based on this pilot. And because the uplink channel and downlink channel have this reciprocity relationship. So then the estimated channel in the uplink can be used for downlink processing, use the downlink transmission, or for beamforming purposes. So this is how to obtain channel estimation for the TDD systems. But there are also legacy systems where the uplink and downlink are in different frequency bands. So these are called frequency division duplex massive MIMO systems. And channel reciprocity does not necessarily hold in different frequencies. So in this case, then what you have to do is you have to do pilot channel estimation in the downlink. You have to transmit pilot from the base station to the users. Then the users will then estimate their channel. But this channel needs to be fed back to the base station. So the base station will collect the channels from all the users and jointly do this multi-user precoding to do this precoding. So I'm going to divide this talk into two parts. First, I'm going to look at the FDD system. This is a more difficult system to obtain CSI. Then the second part of the talk, I'm going to look at the TDD. Okay, so this is the first part of this talk, channel estimation and feedback for FDD massive MIMO. So again, so this is the problem. So let's look at what the problem is. So let's look at the conventional downlink FDD wireless system design. And such a problem involves typically 3 steps. So as I mentioned before, what we do is the base station will send a downlink pilot first. And let's assume that the channels for each user are independent. So these users will measure their own channel. Okay, so they will do this channel estimation step at the UE site, at the user equipment site. Then what they have to do is they have to quantize the received channel and feedback this channel to the base station. Now, the channel is analog, right? So that's why you need to have this quantization step. And quantization step can be done through a codebook, for example. Then the first step, the third step is the base station will collect the channel from all the users. Then it will come up with a precoding vector for the users that's being scheduled. Okay, so this precoding, notice, is a function of the channel of all the users. Okay, so this is the traditional approach of how to obtain channel state information and subsequently to do precoding for the FDD MIMO system. Now let's analyze this system a little bit more. One of the main points of this talk, or the first part of this talk, is that this traditional system where we do single user channel estimation and channel feedback for multi-user precoding. Okay, so this is really not optimal. The reason that this is not optimal is that we should really be thinking about this downlink FDD precoding problem as a distributed source coding problem. And we can think of the users as detectors or the sensors. What the users do is they measure their own channel. Then what it does is it will transmit a quantized version of this channel to a centralized location, namely the base station. And the base station will collect those quantized versions of the channel for all these users and come up with this precoder. Okay. We can think of this overall system as a distributed source coding problem because this is really independent realization, independent observations of H1, H2 up to HK. Then this V, this precoder, is a function of these H's, this function of these H. So the problem is really, how should I quantize each of these channels? How should I do a source coding on these channels such that the resulting V is as effective as it can be? Okay. So this is distributed source coding because the observations are distributed in space. Well, the construction of this V, the coming up with this centralized precoder, this construction of V is centralized. Now let's look at what the traditional system do. What the traditional system does is they do a channel estimation followed by quantization at each user site, and each of these are done independently. Okay, and at the receiver, they reconstruct these channels again independently. And once those channels are reconstructed, then those reconstructed channels are taken together to design a precoder. Okay, so therefore, this is doing a separation approach. This is trying to reconstruct the channel first, then to do precoding. But this separation approach is not necessarily optimal because there's no reason to get the channel estimates themselves. All I care about is some function of these channels. That's what I care about. So this is why there's opportunity to do better. Okay, so much more efficient distributed feedback system can be designed. So that's the point of this talk. So let's see, how do we do this? So let me go back a little bit and talk about why distributed source coding is an interesting problem. So information theoretical study of distributed source coding originated in the 1970s. And the first paper on this is really by Dave Slippin and Jack Wolf in 1973, where they recognized that if you have two encoders encoding two different sources and a single decoder trying to reconstruct those sources, there's opportunity to do some sort of fancy coding to take advantage of the fact that the decoder is joined. You have a joined decoder and a separate encoder. Okay, so a prototypical example is as follows. Suppose we have two sequences of x1 and x2. Okay, they're both Bernoulli 1/2 sequences, so they're not compressible by themselves. And let's further suppose that these two sources are correlated. Okay, so they differ with probability p in each location. So most of the locations, they are the same, but every so and then there are some locations that are different. Now, if you do independent source coding of two sources, then you require 1 bit per symbol for x1 and 1 bit per symbol for x2 in order to reconstruct x1 and x2. Okay, so this does not take advantage of this correlation between x1 and x2. But you can do better than that. The way to do better than that is to still use 1 bit to reconstruct x1, but to take advantage of the fact that because x1 is available at the decoder, what you could do is you can form a parity check of x2. Then, based on this parity check, you can reconstruct x1 treating reconstruct x2 treating x1 as that information. Okay, so this now requires less information than R1 equal to 1 and R2 equal to 1. Okay, so the main point there is you can take advantage of this correlation in order to save the amount of bits, okay, despite the fact that the encoders are distributed. So this is a lossless version of distributed source coding. Now, they can be extended to lossy as well. Here's another example of a distributed source coding. This one is due to Corner and Martin in a famous paper. What they showed is the following. Suppose that the decoder is not interested in reconstructing x1 and x2 by themselves. Rather, decoder is only interested in to know in which locations do x1 and x2 differ. Okay, in other words, the decoder try to compute a function of x1 and x2. And they show that you can do even better than Slippin-Wolf coding. How do you do that? What you do is you can compute parity bits of x1 and compute parity bits of x2. Okay, so the decoder collects two sets of parities. Now, the location that the x1 and x2 differ is essentially computing the XOR of x1 and x2. Okay, but the parity bits of x1, if you take XOR of the parity bits of x1 with parity bits of x2, this is equivalent to the parity bits of x1 XOR x2. So then based on this parity bits, based on these two sets of parity bits, by XORing them, you can already find out where the locations where x1 and x2 differ. Okay, so this is an example that shows that if your objective is to compute a function of x1, x2, this will require even fewer number of bits. So you can gain even more efficiency in terms of amount of feedback required. So this talk is about taking advantage of these ideas and apply them in a multi-user communication setting in terms of channel feedback. Okay, so let's see, how do we do this? So the idea is to think of this channel estimation and feedback process as a distributed source coding problem. So you have encoder 1, encoder 2 up to encoder k. Each of them observe a realization of the channel, and these channels are IID. Okay. Now take advantage of the fact that this V trying to compute a function of these channels. It's computing a precoding vector as a function of these channels. So precoding is trying to do some sort of zero forcing precoding, right? Trying to eliminate interference. All right, so therefore you can implement a distributed source coding strategy to enable a good precoding design with fewer number of bits of feedback. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. Now, the design of optimal distributed source coding strategy is still a difficult problem. The reason is that we need to know the statistical source in general, right? In order to apply these information theoretical ideas. And further, even if you know the statistical source, design these optimal distributed source codes is a difficult problem. So as an example, before you need to figure out how to design parity check matrices, right? So these are difficult problems. So this is where deep learning comes into the picture, right? So these kind of difficulties motivate us to propose a deep learning methodology, and we can do end-to-end design so that we can replace the encoder at each user by a deep neural network, and replace a decoder at the central processor by a neural network. And those encoder and decoders, not only does this quantization process, it also does channel estimation, and it also does precoding at the same time. Okay, so we can design an end-to-end system. And further, we can also throw in the design of pilots for free. So we can design the entire system, including the pilots. So this is the main idea. So let me show you how this works. Okay, so to summarize what we talked about so far. So why is deep learning well suited for this to tackle this type of problem? This is because, different from conventional design methodology, a deep learning can join design all components of the end-to-end performance optimization at the same time. And also, deep learning implicitly learns the channel distribution in a data-driven fashion without requiring tractable mathematical model. And this is important because we often don't have a very good channel model in the wireless communication, even in the wireless communication setting. And also important is that computationally now we have parallelizable structure that allows us to optimize these DNNs. Okay, so in contrast, this line of work with many recent papers on this topic, but most of these topics focus on channel estimation problem by themselves. And what we are advocating is we're going to bypass channel estimation and go directly to the metric of interest, which is to maximize some sort of system performance, such as sum rate. Okay, so this talk considers a multi-user case as in contrast to some of the previous single-user designs, and we're going to provide a end-to-end approach for directly maximizing the system throughput. Okay, so let's set about this problem. So here's a channel model. So this is what we talked about. Each of these y at the user side is basically a realization of the channel multiplied by the pilots. So this x tilde is the pilot. Each user observes some version of the pilot. Then it's going to do a quantization step. It's trying to come up with bits, which essentially represents this channel, okay, but maybe not in a direct way. Then we have a Downing precoder at the central processor. What it does is takes Q1 up to QK, these are the bits from the users, come up with a precoder. So what we're going to do is going to design training pilots and feedback scheme at the user, and the precoding scheme at the base station at the same time in order to maximize the system performance. Okay, so our problem formulation is as follows. We're going to maximize, let's assume that we take a sum rate as our system objective. Do we maximize log of 1 plus the signal to noise ratio of all the users, sum across all the users? Subject to that, those precoding vectors V is a function, P, which is a precoder, of a function of those F. F are the quantizers, right? F1 to xk are the quantized version of the channel. So the P takes those quantized version of the channel, come up with this V, okay, subject to the power constraint and subject to also the pilot design. Okay, so this x tilde is the pilots. This is also up to us. We can design the pilots. So let's assume these pilots have power constraint. Then what we do is we're going to design the pilot, design the quantization process at each user, and design the precoding process at the base station at the same time in order to maximize the overall system throughput. Okay, so this is our problem formulation. you see that if you want to solve this directly using classical mathematical programming approach, this will be a very difficult problem to solve. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace each of these encoder by a deep neural network, and also replace the decoder by a deep neural network. Okay, so this is just a classical feed-forward, fully connected neural network, and the main thing is that the output of this neural network is a binary layer. Now, suppose we have q bits to be transmitted through this feedback bits, then we have q of these neurons, each output these +1 or -1. Okay, so this is how we get the rate constraint between the users and the base station. And note here that the pilot transmission, the optimization in pilot, essentially you get it for free. The reason is that the pilots is essentially a linear layer in the neural network. So when you do the back propagation to optimize these weights of each layers, you can just optimize the pilots at the same time. Okay, so the uplink is again layers of the feed-forward neural network, followed by the sign function. Make sure that the last layer output binary values, and the downlink precoder is to take those binary values and to come up with these layers, the parameters layers, so that it produces the correct output. Okay, so you have to decompose the real and imaginary components of this precoder. And system objective is this. So now you can use backpropagation to design this overall system. So this is an end-to-end design that maximize system throughput across all the parameters of the system. So one of the complications in this training of the neural network is this binary layer. So in this binary layer, the gradient is essentially 0 if you just take a binary layer. So what you should do is to use this straight-through approach, and specifically to do this annealed sigmoidal adjusted straight-through approach to approximate this binary layer by this arctangent-like function. Then you gradually anneal this so that eventually this will become a 0-1 function. Okay, so if you do this annealing trick with this straight-through approach, then you can train this entire neural network despite the fact that you have a binary layer at the output of the input at the user side. So we have a user side DNN and we have the base station side DNN. To reduce complexity, we can also tie the weights of all the parameters of the user side DNN together in order to make the system more generalizable. So generalization ability is a big deal. Okay, so we have to make sure that a neural network trained under one set of channel also works for different set of channels. So the way to do this is to train the neural network into varying different channel models to ensure robustness. We also want to make sure that this is generalizable across K. So we don't want to design the neural just for 2-user case or 4-user case. We want to make sure that it works for all users. So what we can do is we can tie the parameters of all the user side DNN to a common set of DNN parameters. Okay, so this is another trick that we do. And further, we want to be generalizable with respect to B. So here B is number of quantization bits, number of feedback bits from the user side to the base station. Now, through this architecture, you might think that the architecture determines what is the level that you will require, because number of neurons at the upper layer is equivalent to is correspond to the number of quantization bits that you'll be doing here. What we're going to do is, instead of using this architecture, we can design a common set of DNN that output, instead of a binary bits, we can output a soft information. We can have it to output soft information, just like attention. Then we can quantize this soft information according to the number of bits we have. Okay, so I'm going to show you some results that shows that you can actually generalize this architecture to arbitrary number of feedback bits. Okay, so that's another thing that's of practical importance. So let me show you how this architecture works under this realistic simulation environment. So this is a millimeter wave channel model that we use to test the viability of this neural network architecture. So we assume that there's LP path of this millimeter channel, each with a gain and the angle of departure. And this keyword A is the array response across a linear array. Assume it's a linear array. And so these are the neural network parameters. We have 4 layers of transmitter, 4 layers of receiver. This is the number of neurons at each layer. Okay, so the last one has B because it requires to output B bits. And the last layer of the base station DNN is 2k times n. K is number of users, n is number of antennas, and 2 is because you have real and imaginary components. So you want, this is the precoder output that you want this neural network to generate. So here's some numerical results to show you the benefit of designing this end-to-end system subject to this feedback constraint. Okay, so here what we're plotting is we're plotting sum rate against the feedback capacity. So this B is number of feedback bits per user. Actually, sum across all the users. There are only 2 users here. There's 2 user system. N is 64 number of antennas. There are 2 cases here. L is number of pilot sequence, pilot length. The size of the pilot, either size 8 or size 64. So this solid black curve is what we get, the performance of our curve. And this curve, the green and purple dot curve, essentially is the classical approach of first estimating the channel using, for example, OMP-based channel estimation approach. Then we use either MRT or maximum ratio combining, or using a zero forcing, this approach to do precoding. You see, there's a wide gap in the sense that we can achieve the same rate with much fewer number of feedback bits. Okay, to illustrate where this gain comes from, we also plotted this dashed black curve. So this dashed black curve is a different approach of using a DNN to do channel estimation. So we're doing channel estimation, we can do the best channel estimation possible. Then once the channels are estimated, then we use either zero forcing or MRT to design a precoder. We show that this approach, which is doing the channel estimation to the best of DNN can do, is still inferior to our proposed approach, which is the end-to-end design. So this shows that by bypassing the channel estimation stage, we can significantly save the number of feedback bits required from the user side to the base station. Okay, so if you're operating at, say, 12 bits per second per hertz, the saving is almost 60%. We are only 1/3 as many feedback bits to achieve the same rate. So this is a very quite an impressive performance gain. So let's also show you some generalizability results with respect to number of paths. Okay, so this is plotting the sum rate as a function of number of paths in the channel model. We see that the resulting sum rate is not a strong function of the path. So this means that by training the neural network across a variety of channels, we can actually get a generalizable set of DNNs. Okay, so this is an interesting result also. And finally, also show you a result about generalizability with respect to B. B is the number of bits in the feedback. So here is the idea of, instead of outputting the binary, have binary output at the last layer of the user side DNN, we have a soft output, and followed by a scalar quantization on each of the value of the output. We see this is the blue curve using the same DNN for all different values of feedback bits, and the black curve is to use a different DNN for different values of feedback bits. We see that by using the soft output approach, we can get a single DNN to track the performance of the individually optimized DNNs. Okay. All right. So finally, let's look at the generalizability with respect to K. So this is the idea of designing different DNNs for each user versus designing a common DNN that works for all users. Our proposed DNN proposed DNN is the black curve versus the green curve. You see that they track almost identical to each other. So there is really no loss of performance if you tie the parameters of all the DNN parameters together across all these users. Okay, so I'm quite excited about this result. Let me just summarize this part one. Part one really shows that the design of downlink FDD massive MIMO system with limited feedback can be formulated as a distributed source coding problem. And this is really the key insight of the first part. Once you realize that this is a distributed source coding problem, then you see that we could go ahead to solve this problem using this deep learning framework. We presented an end-to-end FDD downlink precoding system that includes the training phase, the feedback phase, and the downlink precoding phase altogether to design a user's IDN and a base station's IDN that's able to get a performance gain in terms of overall throughput. So we jointly designed the pilots, we jointly designed the channel estimation and feedback strategy, and designed the precoding scheme at the base station. And the resulting neural network is a generalizable. So this is our contribution to the FDD problem for massive MIMO. Okay, so this is the first part of this talk. I was told to hold the questions until the end, and I'll go ahead to look at the second part. So far we talked about the FDD massive MIMO. In the second part of the talk, I'm going to talk about TDD massive MIMO. So TDD massive MIMO is a bit easier to design because you can use channel reciprocity to get the channel. But there's still a problem of how to design the precoder even if you know the channel. The reason is that there's power consumption and hardware constraint at the base station side that typically does not allow us to use a fully digital precoder, fully digital beamformer at the base station. So in the second part of this talk, I'm going to look at a particular type of precoding. It's called 1-bit precoding, and to see how a deep neural network can play a role in designing with these 1-bit precoders. So here's the architecture for 1-bit precoding. So this is what's happening in the back, and this is the block diagram at the base station. So base station has M antennas. M is typically very large. In order to save power consumption and to save the precoder complexity, what we do is we assume that each antenna is driven by a 1-bit RF chain. So this means that each antenna can only output essentially ±1 plus minus j. So for our QPSK signal, this is where each antenna is able to output. So it's not able to output a continuous value. So the question is, how should you design these precoders in order to perform precoding, okay, to transmit. So one thing you can do is you can just do the traditional precoding, for example, zero forcing precoding, then you quantize to 1-bit. But that's typically not a very good idea because the quantization noise can be significant. And there's a large literature on using different optimization techniques accounting for this 1-bit constraint for performing this 1-bit precoding. So what we're going to do here is we're going to point out that we can actually jointly design this 1-bit precoder with receiver constellation using this concept called autoencoder. And to do this overall process in a very efficient manner. Okay, so let me show you how to do this. So the way to do this is the following. So this 1-bit precoding problem is really the following problem. You're trying to decide at each antenna, which symbol should you put at each antenna? +1, -1, or +1, -j, okay, in each of these antenna. And we're gonna put the appropriate symbols at each antenna in such a way that after these symbols gets received through this channel at each of these users, the correct constellation points gets received. All right, so this is essentially essentially the 1-bit beamforming problem. So the input to the precoder is the symbol that you want to transmit, as well as the channel. By reciprocity, we assume you know the channel. So what we're doing is, given that we know which symbol that we want each user to receive, how should I put the +1, -1s here so that the correct symbol gets received at the same time by all k users? Okay, so that's essentially is the problem. So this problem falls into the domain of so-called symbol level precoding. And the symbol level precoding is to do precoding on symbol by symbol basis. So traditional precoding is a function of only CSI, but here this precoding is a function of both CSI and symbols. Okay? And this symbol level precoding has certain advantage in the sense that it has this constructive interference property, in the sense that you don't need to have these symbols directly to be at the exact location. If you want this point to be received at Y1, for example, then all these regions are all okay because they'll be decoded to this point anyway by the decoder. All right. So symbol level precoding has some certain advantage in terms of this so-called constructive interference property. For QEM, for example, all these points are allowable. Let's see what's going on here. Yeah, all these points are allowable. So when you design a symbol level precoding, you have to do two things at the same time. You need to design this precoder. Also, you need to design these constellations. So let's get some intuition on what kind of constellations should be designed. So here's an example. Let's fix a particular channel and look at all possible values of +1, -1, and +1, -j's they can put on X. And to see which value would H times X fall to in one of these users. It turns out that if channels are ID, then most of these symbol points, received symbol points, will fall into a circle. But this circle will have a smaller radius as compared to the case where you have continuous value in the X. So if you look at sort of the range of space that the receiver can reach if you have +1, -1, versus the range of space you can reach if you have continuous values of X. This difference is approximately 80%. And more precisely, we had in a previous paper, we showed that the difference is approximately square root of 2/pi, okay, which is about 80% of the infinite resolution case. So this gives us some intuition of how we should design this constellation. But this is only a heuristic. So what we're going to do in the rest of this talk is we're going to use a neural network to discover what is the optimal constellation. So how do we do this? We're going to replace the precoder. Okay, the precoder takes the channel and takes the symbol and to map to this antenna output. We're going to replace this by a neural network that consists of a one-hot mapper plus transmit layers plus a binary layer. Okay, because the output has to be +1, -1. And likewise, we're going to replace the decoder, the receiver, also by a neural network. Okay, so this is the receiver DNN, followed by a softmax layer and argmax. So decoder needs to figure out which symbol is the most likely. So it's essentially making a maximum likelihood estimation across all these symbols to say which one is the max. So again, we'll by a DNN. Okay, so
sorry for the interruption. Please continue. It's okay.
All right. So then further to ensure generalizability, we're going to consider one common DNN to represent decoding procedure for all users. Okay. And then the overall system becomes the following. Okay, so the transmitter, which consists of DNNs, and the receivers also consider DNN. And the receiver's objective is to recover whatever the transmit symbol that was transmitted here. Okay, so then this resembles an autoencoder architecture where our objective is to ensure that these symbols are recovered without error at the receiver, and followed by these where the bottleneck is this binary layers output at each of these antennas. So then we can train this entire network to ensure this n equal to the m hat. So how do we train this network? We use a stochastic gradient descent based backpropagation to train this. Then again, we approximate this binary layer by this annealed sigmoidal adjusted straight through architecture that allows us anneal this then to allow us to train these parameters of this neural network. Okay, so this is an end-to-end autoencoder representation of the entire system that allows us to train. Okay, so this is some information details of this particular system that we have done. Our loss function is a cross-entropy loss. We want to make sure that the same symbol is accurately recovered at the receiver. This is how we're going to anneal this. Then we train this at a variety of different signal to noise ratios. So here's how the system performed. You see, what we're doing is we're also designing the constellation at the same time. We not only are designing the parameters of the neural network, we're also designing the constellation. And what's interesting is the resulting constellation after training resemble a QAM constellation. So this is basically saying that the QAM constellation is the right thing to do. And interestingly, if you look at the size of this constellation, it's about the same as the 0.8 or 80% range that we have derived previously on a theoretical basis. So this shows that this square root of 2 over pi is the right thing to do. As long as you reduce the constellation by about 80%, then this works for 1-bit precoding. Okay. So in this talk, we're basically saying, this part of the talk, we're basically saying that neural network allows us to recover previous results. So this is all very nice. This is some simple error rate curve that shows that our system works pretty well. But this is somewhat not as satisfying because this is just recovering the original result. But what's more interesting is that we can actually design a neural network to be robust against channel estimation error. And that is a big deal. And this is because the channel state information is never perfect in practice due to imperfect channel estimation error, or due to limited feedback, or due to mismatch in channel reciprocity. So what we really want is to design a system that's robust to channel estimation error. And the traditional way of robustifying a communication system design is always about finding some sort of model for the channel, then subsequently do a robust optimization. But this is very, very difficult to do, especially if you have something like a simple network precoding design. So in the last sort of 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to show you that you can actually do a data-driven approach to enable robust symbol level design, and that will allows us to get new insights on this problem. Okay, so let me show you how that works. So in this last part of the talk, I'm still going to look at the symbol level precoding, but for simplicity, I'm no longer constraining myself to plus or minus 1. Let's assume that we have symbol level precoding subject to a power constraint. So again, the transmitter is a function of the symbol that you want to transmit, as well as the channel state information, and the receiver trying to recover the channel. Okay, so again, we replace this transmitter by a deep neural network, and replacing the receiver also by a deep neural network. And our objective is to make sure that the transmit symbols are recovered at each of these receivers. Okay. So to test our hypothesis that this neural network is more robust to channel estimation error, we assume the following channel model. Again, we assume a limited scattering millimeter wave channel, where the gain and the angle of departure for each of these channels have certain uncertainty. So this delta alpha and delta theta is the uncertainty in the angle, as well as the uncertainty in the gain. Okay, in the channel gain, the path gain of this particular path. So we're going to replace the transmitter by the deep neural network, and also replace the receiver by the deep neural network, then undergo this overall autoencoder type of training, while injecting the channel uncertainty into the training process, so that the transmitter, receiver, and DNNs both are aware of the fact that the channel may be uncertain according to certain certain uncertainty model. So this is the data-driven way of allowing the transmitter and the receiver to learn about this channel uncertainty. So let me show you how that works. So again, this is the end-to-end autoencoder representation. And these, well, we give the nominal values of alpha and theta as the input to the DNN, but the actual channel estimation error are injected in the channel training process, in the autoencoder training process. So let me show you how that works. So implementation detail is as follows. We have 4 layers of the transmitter and 4 layers of the receiver, and the thetas are chosen to in a range of about 10 degrees with 1 degree error. Okay, the delta of alpha is chosen to be 0.001. Okay? So this is the nominal value of alpha. This is the variation around alpha. So here is our some numerical results, our proposed end-to-end training. This is the red curve here, as compared to a non-robust training. It turns out this channel, the symbol level precoding is very sensitive to channel estimation error. So if you take a non-robust symbol level precoding and try to inject channel estimation error, it will basically fail to perform altogether. But our system is able to perform despite the fact that we have the uncertainty in the angle of departure as well as uncertainty in the path gain. Okay, so this is an interesting result. Even more interesting is the way that this overall autoencoder is able to design this constellation points. You see, we're designing constellation points at the same time. And this is the resulting constellation point for the 3-user system. Here I'm only plotting the real versus imaginary part of the constellation, values of the constellation. You'll see that what it's doing is it's essentially making the constellation range in the outer part to be larger and the constellation range in the inner part to be smaller, so that is able to take into account that the channel may be uncertain, there may be the angle arrival may be off by a fraction of a degree, and the gain may be off. So these larger areas of these constellation points correspond to the effort by the system to combat this channel uncertainty. You see that these constellation points are designed just in the right way that these channel estimation errors can be taken into account in both the transmitter and the decoder DNN. Okay, so this is a illustration to see that this deep neural network architecture is able to explicitly account for channel uncertainty. So here is some more numerical results of the SCR performance as a function of the channel, as a function of the delta theta here. So we designed this deep neural network to account for 1 degree of delta. So that's why you see this works really well, within 1 degree. But after this 1 degree, our single rate gets worse as well. Okay, so there's obviously a limit to what it can do, but within this limit, it's doing as well as it can. Okay, so let me conclude this talk by first summarizing part 2 of this talk. In the part 2 of this talk, we propose an end-to-end design for WIMP precoding and also for symbol level precoding. The idea is to use the DNN autoencoder to join design the transceiver and the constellation. And the main point is that this design is able to account for channel estimation error and it leads to a more robust received constellation in a limited scattering environment. So as a concluding remark, the traditional paradigm for communication system design is to model first, then to optimize. What's interesting about machine learning is that it allows a data-driven approach. In the first part of the talk, we saw that it allows us to do channel estimation, feedback, and precoding without explicitly estimating the channel. And the overall system is a distributed source coding problem that's much more efficient than if you design each component by themselves. In the second part of the talk, we saw robust precoding and detection, again, without explicit channel uncertainty model. It learns the uncertainty based on the data. Right? And in all these problems, key feature issues are generalizability. We want to make sure that a DNN trained in one set of the model can also generalize to other models. And training and computational complexity is also an issue. It's very data intensive. So ways to do this with less complexity is highly desirable. Okay, so with this, let me conclude this talk. Thank you for all of you for attending.
Oh, thank you, Wei. Now, there's quite a number of questions, so I'm trying my best. Well, to the audience, now I'm trying to combine some of the questions. So, in case I miss some of the question or you actually have further concerns, feel free to switch on your microphone, and we'll try to accommodate. Now, Wei, I first of all want you to go to page 13.
Okay. So I'm looking at the chat at the same time. 13. I cannot see my
1-3, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I just need to move the mouse so that I can see. Okay, good.
Yeah, because there are so many questions, so I'm trying to summarize in a way. Now, in the beginning, now I also had that question because when you look at this formula, it seems that we need to know the channel in order for you to design PyNode, the mapping, and also the precoder.
That's right. So in the training process, the output of the training process is the DNN at the transmitter and the DNN receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So we give many samples of the channel. We give many samples of the channel.
Yep.
So each sample, it outputs the Q, which is the feedback bits, and output the V, which is the precoder. Then we evaluate.
Let me be a little bit concise then. Sorry to interrupt. So the more accurate one should be the next slide, in which I think you put an expectation, page 14.
Yeah.
That one might be a more accurate one, right? You actually look at the average throughput.
That's right. It's a mini batch. It's a batch of channels. Then you look at it.
Yes. So instead of having constraints, you put everything into the objective function and do the training job.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, because there were also questions, if you would like to go back to the previous slides, there were a question about, how can we put a neural network to be trained on positive semi-definite matrices, which I think is the second constraint. But I guess if you put them all streamlined, put everything into the objective function, that should be, this one.
The V is a precoder, is a precoding matrix. So each depends on how you stack it. In each row, each column, the precoder has a power constraint. So we normalize it at the end.
All right.
There's no semi-definite constraint here.
Okay. So now maybe I move to the second question, which is still closely related. Can we go back to the next slide, which I think the equation will be more accurate. All right, so this is the one we do. So now some of the questions are asking whether you are doing online training and offline. Now, but from the equation here, I think it should be offline, right?
Correct. Yeah. Of course, this is going to be offline.
Yep. So now then there comes a series of questions asked by several audience. Now, okay, so I wrote, first of all, there has to be offline. Now, then one of the very meaningful questions that was asked is that how realistic that will be compared to real environment. If you use I suppose you're using synthetically generated channels and stuff.
That's right.
To do the training. So now this is a challenging question. Does it work well in real dynamic environment? That was the question.
Right. So this is why we looked at the generalizability of this approach with respect to channel model, different models. We don't know how well that this works in real channel because we don't have real channel to experiment on. But we did look at generalizability with respect to LP. LP is number of path in the channel. And we saw that even if you train in one set of channel and testing a different set of channel, the performance is not too sensitive to this parameter number of path. So this gives us some confidence that this will work in the real channel.
Okay, all right. Now go back to page 14. I mean, again, that equation, I think that one is the very meaningful one to explain everything. Now, okay, there's so many questions, so I'm trying to eliminate some of them. Give me a second. Now, there's a question from Chandra Murphy. Now, that will be about the achievability of the achievable rate. So he was asking whether the achievable rate you show here would be achievable. Now,
Okay.
although now my version, my understanding is that you are not looking at achievable rate. You're just trying to do the best out of but on average, that's what you do.
Yes, but I think I understand what Chandra come from. So in order to achieve, once this precoder is designed, you still need one symbol to make sure the receiver also is aware of this channel. So there is one extra symbol needed so that once this precoders are designed, the precoder combined with the channel, that combination needs to be learned at the receiver. So if you assume that can be done, then this overall system is achievable. So maybe that's what he's asking.
Yeah.
Hey, wait, Chandra here. Yes, that's the answer.
Yeah,
I think Ford
beautiful.
also answered this in the chat.
Okay, very good. Very good. Yes.
Okay, Chandra, you happy?
Very, very, very happy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Then yeah, I probably move to the next question. Now one of the question was asked how to obtain training data, but I think this one may be somewhat besides that. I think you are doing offline training. You are generating some channel and synthetically and then try to do the job, right?
That's right.
So of course, the question that can further go on would be how realistic your synthetically generated channels would be. But I guess I don't know. I would ask the industry to do it. But before they do that, pay me a lot of money. That's it. If they want a realistic channel.
Yeah, well, even industry don't have a lot of realistic data. It takes a lot of effort. I mean, it's very expensive to generate it.
Yeah, exactly. So now there were also questions about how well it would be when dealing with time varying channel. But I guess since we are not talking about offline learning, so I guess this one should be fine. You would do very powerful offline learning, hoping that when the channel changes quite fast, you are still hoping that the offline design on average will be good enough.
Correct.
Okay.
So this is operate within the coherence time, right? So this is FDD system. You have certain channel, then you try to estimate and feedback, then use this channel right away. Hopefully it hasn't changed.
Okay, so Chelsea Young, I hope that answer your question. Now, of course, the question could still be asked, right? How universally powerful that offline training would be compared to online design. But that would be a very long story to further discuss. So my apology, I will skip that one. This is still open question. I mean, whether you learn it online or you do it almighty offline, that we can always debate that. Now, I myself also have a question closely related to that. I mean, this design. Now, have you thought about frequency selective fading channel or design that can accommodate varying or different number of users?
Frequency selective channel, it's a good idea, is a good question. We haven't experimented with this. So typically you need to design different beamformer and different frequency bands. So that adds to a complexity. In terms of number of users, yes, we did. We have a generalizability results with respect to number of users. So this is number of users varying. So we tie the DNN weights across all the users together, and to make sure the same kind of common set of weights it will work regardless of number of users.
For the training, is it one training for one set of number of users, or is it universally designed for any users?
It's trained at a particular number of users, but it's used for all sorts of other number of users.
All right. Okay. Now, there was also a question about whether the design would be trained for particular SNR point or different, although some of your postdoc already answer is for all signal to noise ratios.
Correct. Well, a range of signal-to-noise ratio.
Mm-hmm,
Train at a range. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, all right then. Now, another question that is asked by Fei Gao is that, is it supervised or unsupervised learning?
So we have an objective function. The objective function is the sum rate in the first
Is
part.
it some rate?
The second part is the cross entropy loss.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it counts as unsupervised.
All right.
Whatever you want to call it. A cross entropy loss is just objective function, right?
Okay. So I think it's about the first part of the talk.
Okay, very good.
So okay, so you're using, would you mind say that again? The training objective is cross entropy?
Right. No, the first part is this is the objective function.
You're using the sum rate. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
The second part is the cross entropy is the objective function, because we want the symbol to be recovered at the receiver. So whatever symbol here, we want to recover it here. So that's a cross entropy loss we use.
Fei also asked you whether you have something published, but I will let you guys fight over that offline.
Okay, you can take a look at the slides we have.
Okay, so all right, I'll try to see whether there are more questions. There's so many questions. All right, Raymond Yang was asking a question. May I interpret your word in part 2 this way? You first assume multi-path angular channel and suppose the transceiver has partial knowledge on it. Finally, you let the black box learn what is best for the symbol error probability.
Can I see the question? I didn't get completely the question.
Can you see that in the chat box?
It's
almost by the end.
Yeah. It's.
I can resend that again.
Yes, please. Or if Raymond's still there, you can.
Okay, now here we go.
Transceiver has partial knowledge. Last part, when we have channel estimation error, that's correct. That's correct. So the answer is yes. We have this overall. We have this overall system where some parts of the channel is known. Then the remaining part is uncertain. The alpha and theta all have variation associated with it. We have a DNN here and a DNN here. Then we want the black box to make sure that the same M gets recovered at all the receivers.
All right. So Raymond, unless if you have questions, feel free to open your microphone. For otherwise, I'll try to switch to a different question. Hey, To, I was a little bit lost with so many questions. Did we have any question missing?
Actually, I think the question after WY is the following. So
okay,
a question
so that
from
was not from Raymond. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so I realized that. Okay.
Sorry.
Anyway, so this question goes by like how do we know that the channel training samples that we use have sort of the same statistics as the channels that we see in the physical world? Like how do we guarantee that?
We don't.
Or how can we do so to kind of make it as close as possible?
But this is what communication engineers have been doing in the past 50 years. In every standard, the first step in standardizing, say, Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or cell system is to go out to measure the channel, derive the channel model. Then we can talk about this set of transceivers. This is good for the channel model. So wireless engineers have a lot of experience with channel models. So we're reasonably confident that these channel models has been used in standards in the millions of phones around the world is a sensible one, at least, so that you can design your systems assuming those channels are the correct ones. So I think we're as far as wireless engineers are concerned, much better shape than other disciplines where truly the models are not knowable. But here we do have some reasonable confidence about these models.
So, but as long as the simulations are concerned that they are like the data that we use for trainings are a faithful representations of those we use for simulations, like the simulations that you presented.
Yeah, simulation we presented is assuming those models. Okay, but
got it.
We are interested to know if the realistic channel doesn't come from these model. How do we perform? So that's where the generalizability comes in.
All right. So I guess that kind of answers your question, Zhao Wei. I mean, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yes. I think I got the question answer.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Yu.
All right. So next up, we have a question from Neil. So could there be a problem for overfitting when we do the trainings?
That's one of the big mysteries of neural network, right?
I agree.
So I don't have a good answer to that.
But I guess as you look at the generalizabilities, as you investigate, as you do simulations to see how generalized the trained models are, it kind of answer the question in an empirical way.
Exactly, we only have empirical evidence.
That's true.
We don't have a theory about when to stop.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so let me go through the chat box again. So because okay. So there's another questions. So like whether we can use neural networks to solve some kind of some problems in the communication regimes that where you have optimized, you have some constraints. So you have a constraint the problems in your design of the precoder or whatsoever. Can the neural networks be also applied to those? Like how do you ensure that the output of the neural networks obey the constraints you wanted?
So it depends on what kind of constraint. So here in this example, we have a power constraint at the transmitter. So that's why we just do a normalization layer to make sure that
those are easy.
Yeah.
What if you have some more complicated ones?
It's a very difficult problem. So you have to look at each individual situation to see whether you incorporate that into the neural network architecture. If you can, that's the best. If not, then we are going back to Lagrangian. Instead of optimizing objective, then objective minus lambda times the constraint. Then it gets into the question of how do you update lambda and things like that. But this is the best we know how to do.
Yeah, my version of the answer, now I think the question is pretty interesting. My version of the answer is that if you use standard neural network, the answer is no. Now, but if you would like to look at some new design in deep neural networks, such as the so-called deep unfolding or deep unrolling, the answer is sort of. It is possible you can build some non-conventional design to deal with that. But that is a new research in which we don't have a simple answer to that question.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
All right. So another question from Mingze. So actually that is once again about how do we train the symbol constellations? Like how do we, so for example, do we need to specify how many symbols do we have in the constellations and what other parameters are actually needed? So in the second part of the presentation.
Yeah, we do. I think so, we do.
Okay, yeah. I think this slide actually tells everything. Right. Okay.
I think, is there more questions? Ming's question is also answered, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I guess if there are no further questions, I would like to invite you all to thank Professor Yu for the very exciting talk. And if you have further questions, please feel free to send emails to Professor Yu offline. And very soon the presentation slides will be available on the seminar website as well. So thanks for attending and have
Thank
a
you.
nice day. Thanks.
And thank you for making the Zoom system overloaded. This is the first time in this series. And thank you. If you'd like to stay, ask the speaker a few more questions and stuff like that, we have our virtual coffee break. So feel free to stay if you like. Thank you.
Thanks up.